They overpromised on a lot of their products that they were going to bring. They were going to bring a load of allowed commentary in about their success. And it started off being, this disruptive brand is going to set up this, this well-meaning foundation. They're going to do this great work. It was overhyped, overpromised. And when you overpromise and then underdeliver, then you become the story. And there's a feeding frenzy around the negativity. There was never any positivity, and they were always compared because, in a sense, I think the American media didn't have the same perspective as the UK media, who very much saw him being pulled away from the heart and the bosom of this country. They had their own sort of royalty. It was again these. A lot of young people in America actually sort of say, well, why can't they live their life? They're in love together, happily married and whatever. And of course, they had to drive because they were in maybe not a premeditated PR war, but they were actually cast in that role. And they were trying to outdo, an organisation of the royal household who have been through so many, and at the time the Queen was still alive giving that advice. And she was a wise woman who understood the old world of legacy media, maybe not of the modern day comms. But it was never complain, never explain. They had reinvented themselves post-Diana. If you think of the turmoil they had when Charles was with Camilla and accepting Camilla back into a divorced woman back into the hold, all those sort of things they'd run through. And so these disruptive souls who were going to somehow, be bigger than the royal family himself, that was their mistake.
I mean, when we go through mistakes, I think the first mistake was the Oprah Winfrey interview, which you mentioned earlier. That was them just being incredibly angry. And then the more that they've told their story, or the more that they've put their side across, that they've become less popular over the time.
I think it was more to the fact that their popularity certainly diminished in this territory and possibly around the Commonwealth, if that's the expression, but not in America. I think there was a golden moment where they could have built on the sort of idea that America had brought these people into the centre of their attention.
Can I ask you about that? Just on that before we move on with the Oprah interview. I always wonder about this because it was about a year or so after they'd left royal life. We know from Harry himself that that's not how he wanted to leave. He wanted half in, half out. So this life that they had, they didn't have a very clear strategy. And there was a lot of noise around them. This was really their first chance to speak for themselves. And we know how it's played out now. But at the time, is there a way they could have done that interview and sort of presented themselves better, I suppose, to the public? Could that have been a better PR operation than what it was?
No, they couldn't, because you're doing a deal and you as a journalist, you want the thing that is talked about across the world. You want the eyeballs, you want the clickbait around it. And, of course, you are talking to probably one of the most famous interviewers in modern television history. There's no control over it. You've done a deal and you think you are in control, but you're not. And that was a big mistake, that it was so explosive. And, the lessons are there. The lessons surely were there about the mistakes that Diana made, giving the Bashir interview. There were mistakes in recent history in sort of Andrew, giving the Makeless interview. They should think, well, how do we do this? Less is more. What's happened to whatever this new jam brand that she's bringing out? I mean, how ridiculous is that? What does she want to be? The next sort of Martha Stewart? I think that, you see desperation slipping in now, and that should be an indication to say, let's start again and learn, indeed, from the royal family post-Diana. How they brought in some of the best people. Paddy Harverson, remarkable person who shape-shifted the whole comms business. Bring people in who know their stuff and build a team out of that, rather than getting yes people to do what you want, backed up by some Rottweiler of a lawyer who's going to send out letters to every last person. It's the way they're doing about it is akin to sort of trying to brand snow in a hailstorm.
It does feel like there have been movements in the right direction, I think. And you said patience there. That's such a good way of putting it as well, because I think that they seem to be really results driven in that first year or two. I kind of sort of conflate it with, you know, when you go through a breakup and you're trying to prove to your ex that you're fine. They got to the US and they wanted to say, hey, we can do this on our own. And I think this year, really since earlier in the year when Harry flew over to see his dad when he heard he had cancer, from the things that Harry said, from the fact that his book is being released in paperback, I think it's next month, and he's not adding anything to it, things like that, I think there's signs that perhaps they're learning these lessons, perhaps, and that's their plan moving forward, is to sort of now stay the course and look toward reconciliation and a bit more peace.
Well, yeah, their plan, as we understand it, is that they're not going to say any more. They're not going to criticise the royal family anymore. They're not going to talk about William and the King, and because that was hugely damaging to their brand, because they come across as this moaning couple. As you pointed out earlier, that they've got this wonderful life out there. Stop moaning. They're trying not to moan. They're just trying to look positive. I think it's look to the future and look at all the positives and look at all the great work that they've achieved over the year with their trip to Colombia and Invictus Games coming out and stuff like that. So they're trying to get rid of this. We're this angry couple shouting insults and we're moaning, to being a more respectful couple, talking about positivity and positive plans for the future.
And they seem really good at it. When they're out, you just mentioned Colombia, you see them, and Harry at the Invictus Games, they're actually very good when they're deployed effectively. You know, it's just been that there's been a lot of directions they've gone in the last few years that are quite negative. But when they're focusing on things they care about, I think they can do a lot of good.
The issue is, I think, I'm saying something radical here, I think if you think people still love Harry, they still like him. That's the problem.
Yep.
Problem is, they don't like the woman he loves.
I don't think that's radical. I don't think that's controversial. I think I speak to people and it's very much the same. Harry is still Diana's son. You know, as I say, you talked about the walking behind the coffin. You know, mothers still remember, I'm sure, you know, we all still remember the funeral where he walked behind Diana's coffin, that heartbroken little boy. We still kind of care for him, but we'd never really got to know Meghan. I mean, how long was she here for?
So they dated, I think it was 18 months from when we found out about her relationship with Harry to them getting married, and then she was in the royal family for less than 2 years. So, as you say, Harry is so loved here. He was Britain's favourite son. He was their cheeky son, so popular. And it's only really been a few years, it feels like a lot longer, but it's only really been a few years since he left. But I think people still hold that great affection for him, but they never really knew her. They didn't even know her as a royal, really. It was such a short period.
There was a lot of outpouring of love for her, because they felt he found someone fairly late in life, in terms of how royals, you know, sort of get married off. So I think, you know, it was in her hands to develop that. But of course, when you come from Hollywood, you come from the star system, when you come from, you know, making sure that you're absolutely on the red carpet for X, Y, and Z, make sure you've actually got your table in restaurants, you're actually seen and thereabouts, you know, they were not the premier act. And actually, in some ways, where spare was turned out of as, oh, poor me, I was a spare, you know, I was, you know, bullied by my brother, all this sort of this nonsense. Actually, being a spare in some ways was a huge advantage for him. And I think with the, you know, the diagnosis about the illness of the king, you've got, you know, the sort of treatment that Kate was going through. Actually, the royal family needed Harry. It slimmed down.